How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 4 of What If Deku Had White Flames. And before I start this What If off, I would like to ask all of you to put your What If suggestions down in the comment section below. And now, let's begin. Izuku would wake up in a hospital bed completely confused on where he was. He would start to look around as he would finally realize he was in a hospital room, as he would see Bakugo in a bed next to him, still just unconscious. So Izuku would continue looking around as finally Recovery Girl would open the door and would rush over to Izuku, seeing that he was awake. "You know you're very lucky to be alive," she would say. "Your flame cork somehow miraculously stopped the bleeding from happening. If that didn't happen, you surely would have died from just bleeding out." Izuku would say, "That's something," he would say, as she would tell him that he has a month to rest before the UA Sports Festival occurs, and he should probably drink lots of water, get a ton of sleep, and just to rest up. He probably shouldn't go out training or pushing his body to its limits, as that could possibly cause him to injure himself even further. Izuku wouldn't care about these words or the opinion of Recovery Girl, as he would just get up, not caring what she had just said, and would then walk towards the door. As he would continue out the door and would walk down towards the UA first year dorm rooms and dorm buildings, as Recovery Girl would be chasing after him, yelling at him for him to stop, asking him what the heck he thought he was doing. However, Izuku would not mind or not even care what Recovery Girl was doing, as he would make it to the dorms and would walk up to the elevator, going to his room, as he would then open the door, slamming it in Recovery Girl's face. He was not having any of that, and he didn't want to be sitting in a hospital bed for a week, even after he woke up and felt completely fine. His wounds had already completely healed, he thought, as he would get into his room and would open up his chest, or he would lift up his shirt to check out what his body looked like after getting impaled by a massive ice spike. And he was right, it was completely healed. He still felt a bit sore, but he felt completely fine besides that. So he would then get to training from what he had just missed out on, from what he presumably thought was a week since he had just gone unconscious, as he would check the time and date, and he would be right. He was unconscious for around a week. So he would start to make up on what he had lost in his training, just hoping that he hasn't lost any strength or abilities that he has gained while training with his father and Endeavor. So he would then go to sleep wondering what the sports festival will be. They had not been informed or told on anything about the sports festival, and they weren't sure what it could be. I mean, they have watched the sports festival before, but it had already been just different events. It was always 3 events, but it always had 2 different events with a tournament at the end. They were sure about the tournament, but not sure what the first 2 events were going to be. So Izuku would just be left to his own thoughts after he finished his training, wondering what was entailed for him when the month had finally passed. And so Izuku would start to train throughout this month. And finally, when it would end, Izuku would go into school completely prepared for the UA Sports Festival, as he was wondering who he would be facing in the finals of the tournament. He wasn't this cocky, but he knew he would get close to that, and he just hoped he would get into the finals, as he was wondering who he could possibly be versing in it. So when he would walk into the classroom, Aizawa would tell them that they will all be taken down to the locker rooms and be given a key, which has their specific size of their PE uniforms in the 1A locker room, and that's where they'll get changed, and then they'll be transported into the Class 1A waiting room, where they will wait until further notice. And so they would all get on the bus around 2 hours before the UA Sports Festival officially started, and they would arrive there around 30 minutes before it would start. And so They would all go into the locker rooms, get changed, and then go into the waiting room around 10 minutes before it would actually start. However, it wouldn't really start with them going out onto the field for another 20 to 30 minutes, as Midnight and the rest of the heroes and teachers there had to do the introduction with a select few of the students, including Bakugo, who happened to be the first year representative for that year. So they would end up doing the introduction, as Midnight would then call out each class, finishing with Class 1A to please come out onto the field, as the entire crowd would cheer and it would basically look like the entire building was shaking from how loud they were cheering. As they would all walk out, as some of the other classes would just mumble to themselves, asking how come they don't have cheers or they didn't get cheers like that. As Izuku would be sitting there or standing there with his class, just wondering when or what the first event will be and when it will start. As Midnight would then announce that the first event will be a race, and this race will be at this arena area right beside the Sports Festival Coliseum, and there's cameras rigged up all around it, and that's how the spectators are going to see it. And if they could just go over to this specific hallway, they will then be led over to the starting line, as all of the students would do that, and finally a hero would then guide them to the starting line as they would all be lined up. And finally, President Mike would yell "Go" over the intercoms as hundreds of students would race off, hoping to be one of the select 40 allowed into the second event, as Izuku, Todoroki, and Bakugo would maintain the lead in first, second, and third. Izuku in first, using his flames to just guide a path so he could run as fast as he can. Bakugo in a very, very close second, inches behind Izuku, and Todoroki gliding on his ice right behind Bakugo. As they would be so close to each other, it was basically very hard to tell who was in first, second, or third. They were all pretty much tied. So Izuku would finally reach the first obstacle, a giant zero-pointer, as he would send a massive wave of fire right at the zero-pointer, melting it in half, as basically molten metal would start dripping down from where Izuku had destroyed it, as the head was pretty much melted off while the body was still there, as Izuku would hop over this zero-pointer, and so would Bakugo and Todoroki, leaving 2 other zero-pointers for the rest of the 100 or so students that were still running. So Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki would then make it to the second event. This second event being the obstacle jump course, where if they fall, they are eliminated and cannot get back up to continue on with the race. So Izuku would take this somewhat carefully, and so would Bakugo and Todoroki, but Bakugo could legit just fly over it, and Todoroki could just make an ice path over it. So while Izuku was running, both of them had already made it to the minefield, while Izuku was still hopping from island to island. And finally, Izuku would make it, but Bakugo and Todoroki were already halfway done. So Izuku would then basically use his fire as hands, implanting them into the ground, and they would push back, launching Izuku forward, as he would then rush right past both Bakugo and Todoroki before falling flat right before the finish line, as he would then see Bakugo pass him, getting first place, but Izuku was able to cross the finish line, gaining second, with his brother Todoroki being in third, as the crowd would cheer in excitement, as this was the fastest anyone had ever completed the course in UA history. It was crazy how fast they were able to complete it. And so the crowd would cheer even louder after hearing that just announcement by President Mike, as finally all of the other students would finish after around 20 or so minutes. So they would all be sent back to the waiting room with a 20 or so minute break before they were going to announce the second event, where they will then tell them to do whatever they need to make the second event happen. So when that 20 minutes was up, they would all go outside to see Midnight standing on another podium, as she would then say that how the second event was a cavalry battle, and that this battle will be giving all of the teams a set of point headbands, whether you got first, second, third, to all the way up to 40th. 40th having the least amount of points, first having the most amount of points, with 10 million. As they would then hand out the headbands, the point headbands to all of just the people who were there and had passed, as they would then tell them they have 5 minutes to collect a team of 4, including yourself. So 3 people, including you, and you have to choose who will be carrying the basically leader of that group, who will also be wearing the headbands, and you have to basically steal others' headbands, and the top 4 groups will make it on into the first round. So Izuku will look around, getting Ida, Uraraka, and Tokiyami in his group, just grabbing the 3 closest people to him, asking them if they would like to be in his group, which they all said yes. As Izuku now having his group, as they would start practicing what they were going to be doing, or just making up a game plan, Izuku would tell them he thinks they already have enough points combined, as they made up pretty much the top 10 people. So if they just stay back and watch everyone else go for someone like Bakugo with 10 million points, they are most likely going to pass easily. So that's what their plan would be, to just hopefully avoid everyone at all costs while maintaining their points. And so when Midnight would tell them all to get in positions and would then sound the horn, signaling a 30-minute timer for the match to begin, they would hopefully just try to stay around the edges of the circle, basically the perimeter of the circle Coliseum. And so they really wouldn't be a part of much action, as they would just be there, not really doing much. As Izuku would see a few groups going for them, however, he was able to send fire towards them to hopefully just make them decide not to go towards them, as he made it quite hot to the point where they were burned by it. It barely touched their fingertips, as they were already reaching out towards Izuku's headbands. However, once it burned the tips of their fingers, they decided to back off, realizing it wasn't worth to go after someone with a flame cork that could possibly hurt them if they were to go on to the tournament, and they would have bad fingers, or they possibly couldn't use their cork, or just some reason they didn't want to go towards Izuku. However, most people would not care when Bakugo would send explosions their way, hoping to receive the prize of the 10 million point headband, seeing as it was worth it, in their opinion, to get hit by one of his explosions in order to pass on to the third round, and the third and final round, this being, of course, the 1v1 tournament. And so the 30 minutes would end as Izuku would end up getting in around second place, Bakugo's group in first with 10 million some points, Todoroki's group in third, and another group in fourth, with this being Shinso's group. As Izuku would then be sent to another waiting room, while all of the losers there would then be sent into a special place in the crowd meant for their certain class, whether they were in Class 1A, Class 1B, Class 1C, or Class 1D. It didn't matter, they would be sent up into their special just unit for spectating, while all of the people that did pass would then be put in their respective classes' waiting room. And since Shinso was the only person who had made it through to the third round in Class 1C, he would be put as the only one in the waiting room, not having much to say to anybody since no one was there to talk to him. And that's where I'm going to leave this What If off, guys. I thank you all for watching part 4 of What If Deku Had White Flames. I hope you all enjoyed. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.